Hey guys, my name is Elise Wax, and I'm with Sci-Fi Wire, and I'm also an author. We're going to bring up the cast and crew now to talk about what you just saw. So let's bring out Nick, who's the showrunner. And then we've got Jeff, who plays Seth. I'm just calling him out of it. And Aisha, who plays Jules. And then we have Amy, who plays Margot. All right. So, what, Nick? Let's start with you. What were you looking for when you were casting these lovely people?
I was looking for people who felt real. I was looking for people who felt real. I was looking for great dramatic actors who didn't feel like they were in a horror movie. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted people who could go to psychologically complex places. I mean, the story deals with trauma and grief. It's a horror show, but we wanted it to be psychologically compelling. And that was the first thing that we looked for, and the most important thing.
Okay. Now, for the actors, what was it that drew you to your roles?
It pays so I can pay my rent.
That's what I like, honesty.
But no, I mean, to be fair, when I auditioned, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna get this. The script is way too good. I guess I'll just go in and say fuck it. Are we allowed to swear?
I did that too.
Okay,
I
great.
did that too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I realized how incredible a script it was until I went in and then got a call back, and I was like, oh, it's real. And then I reread everything and was like, why wasn't I way more excited about this the first time? Why do I get to do this? This is so cool. Yep.
There are unusual circumstances with both their auditions, because I had seen Amy audition for something else entirely. A friend was working on a movie. She auditioned for it. I saw that audition, and when we called in people for Margot, I said, make sure we see if Amy Forsyth is available. And
Didn't know
probably
that.
saw. Did you know that?
I knew about the audition, but I didn't know. Yeah, cool.
So we probably saw 200 people for the role, and Amy was always the first choice. Stephen Pyatt, the director, who did an amazing job, who's shooting right now, or he would be here. He and I were on the same page from day one, and Amy was the only person that we showed to the network, and there was no problem. I've never had such an easy casting lead experience. And then Aisha auditioned early on, and I was like, she's really good. And then we were told she would be unavailable because we were shooting the pilot of The Bold Type. Is that right? So I kept saying for 6 weeks, I kept telling the casting director, find me another Aisha D. Find us another Aisha. Find us another Aisha. And then we saw a ton of people. Finally, we got a call, and she said, actually, she's going to be available. They're going to be done shooting by the time you get going. I said, all right, perfect. Let's do it. So we chemistry tested the two of them. And the casting director left the camera on even between the takes, so they were just bantering, and the chemistry among the characters was so important. The feeling that they had been friends for a long time, they had a complicated history, and it was just evident immediately that it was going to work.
I think I remember us both with our heads against the back wall, just talking about really morbid, depressing things.
But then we were like, did you just leave the camera on? And she was like, maybe.
That's on the tape, and then the camera goes off.
Anything incriminating on there?
Quite possibly, yeah.
No.
Oh, okay, that's reassuring. Good.
And Jeff, was there anything about Seth that drew you to the role?
Yes. Nick and I had worked together already on a short film a few years ago called The Girlfriend Game that was based on a story that Nick wrote that was in his book of short stories. And I have been so attracted to Nick's writing since I read that short story for the first time. And it was amazing because it's a 2-page short story, right? It's like 2 pages, 3 pages. What?
It's like 6 or 7.
And the format I got it in, it was 2 or 3. But it was, it was, I don't want to give away the short if you ever want to watch it, but it flipped my stomach. Like it affected me so deeply in 10 minutes of reading this, and I felt different all day. And it was, so ever since then, and we ended up making the short together, and very proud of it. It came out very well, and so when he was making a show, I was just like, definitely. He was like, it's, and I was like, I don't care, and so I knew that it was going to be complex and thoughtful and intelligent and artful, and it ended up being all of those things and more. So and the sides were interesting because I didn't really know what the character was or what he was going to do, because obviously in the first episode you don't get a very good idea of who Seth is. But and there was another scene from a later episode, and I remember after I got the part, Nick and I were having lunch, and halfway through the lunch I was like, by the way, what happens? Like what's the deal with me? And I was like, I think it's this. And he goes, no, it's actually this. And I was like gobsmacked. I could not believe that I had I really was like, I figured you out, Nick. And it's this. And I was very wrong. And I'm very excited for other people to see how the whole show comes together, because it's cool and it surprised me. So
Yeah, and with casting Jeff, obviously I knew him from the short film. We had seen a bunch of people that the casting director brought in for this role, which, as Jeff was talking about, takes a hard left turn, and I just could not find the right person. And then suddenly it was like, wait a second, where's Jeff? Somebody call Jeff. And so Jeff chemistry tested with Amy as well, along with a bunch of other people, and it worked. I mean, it was
I remember that chemistry test. I've you do a bunch as an actor, and I remember that one. I left, and it was just me, Nick, Amy, and the casting director, and I left that, and I was like, if that's not chemistry, I quit. Like, fuck it.
Well, I apologize, Amy, but after you left, there were 4 guys testing or something like that, and like
6.
there were like
There were 6 chemistry reads first,
and they were really good,
but not like Jeff.
And I was like, just FYI, you won't get to make this decision, but just so I know, who
They're like,
did
you have
feel
no
like you
say,
had
but
really
what do you
good,
think?
good chemistry with? It's just like, there's something about Jeff. So.
I think I said there's something about Jeff Ward.
And then we're here.
Now, you guys all seem to have a very good chemistry together, and you're very lively, but it's a very serious show. Were you able to keep it serious by being kind of more lively and silly in between breaks, or did you have to keep character?
No. It was we had moments of craziness, and it was obviously a blast being up there, but it was 2.5, almost 3 months of solid depression.
Winnipeg is a very funny place. Mm-hmm. Has anyone ever been to Winnipeg? Other than us, right here? So I got there on Labor Day, so everything was closed. There was no one on the street. I think Amy was getting in the next day. I think I was one of the first people to arrive. And it was 2 days after I'd finished shooting The Bold Type, so I was exhausted. And I was like, I'll just, I'll go out of my, room and I'll find some food. And that was going to be a hard no because everything was closed and it looked like a ghost town. And
But
the
that
only
doesn't
people looked
change
like
when
bo-
it's
like
not Labor
zombies.
Day. Like that's
No,
always.
no, I thought, oh, it
Winnipeg.
must
I love
be
Winnipeg.
just-
It's a weird
No,
place.
It's an incredible
but
city.
it's beautiful. Like it,
Yeah.
but it's a there's like
Perfect backdrop for a horror show.
It is. It's beautiful
It
and
just like
empty and
feels
special.
haunted, so it was really easy to be in that headspace while we were there. Like Amy and I were staying in this bizarre building that had this hallway with a bunch of exit signs, and it was red. Do you remember that hallway?
Yeah, it was kind. It felt like The Shining, really,
Yeah.
and like weird noise. Weird things happened in that building, but it was great.
Yeah, it was just a weird vibe in general where we were in the time. You know, it was fall and all of that, so it wasn't that hard to.
Yeah, it was fall, and at night in the fall it gets to be about 0 degrees.
Yeah.
So the scenes like outside the No End House when they're going in, it's 0 degrees, and it's
So
there's somebody
cold.
going, actors jackets off before we roll, and then I'm watching like their breath on the screen. I'm like,
I
Wait
think
for
feeling
later.
guilty.
There's an episode that we had a week of night shoots. I mean, I'll leave it at that. But 0 degrees. Just wait for it. You'll know what we're talking about.
and in fact, what you won't see is that it was freezing rain, but the rain was so light that you couldn't see it on screen. So we
You could just
we
feel
rolled.
it. It was awesome. It was so cool.
So it's supposed to be like, a slightly chilly summer night, and they're like taking off the heavy jackets and you were sick, right?
Oh
You got
Yeah, that was-
I got really sick and was just like losing my voice, and I think I had 4 layers of thermals as well as like those Robax things just like all up my body.
Sponsor us.
Because I'm Australian, so I don't do like below 60 degrees. Then I like
Welcome
bail.
to Canada.
Yeah. So
And on screen it
was
just
a
reads
lot.
as like, I'm anxious, I'm scared.
Yeah,
everybody-
like when they would take the jackets away, I'd be
It
like,
helped
"Oh
with
fuck!" And it
performance.
was like there was no work to be done because I felt fucked up. So it was great. Yeah.
So then that leads me to, what was one of the most difficult scenes for each of you to shoot, besides being freezing cold?
One of the last scenes that
Yeah,
I
this
can't
is-
tell you about
Okay.
it. I can't tell you about it, but
Was it that it was emotionally draining or physically or both?
all of it. All of it. The other thing is we shot all 6 episodes at the same time. So some of the stuff that takes place in Margot's house, we had a practical house that was real on a street, and then some of the scenes were also built in, it was recreated in studio. But that particular scene that is in the last episode, we shot, I think, in the second week. And I know, Jeff, your first day, you had one of your biggest, conversations that you had to shoot, and it was your first day. So we're trying to figure out who these people are, and at the same time, having to jump to the end of their arc. So it was that, and it was the emotional aspect and the physical aspect. It was a lot. The water stuff was fun, though. That was great.
And how do you manage to do that if you're just getting into these characters and all of a sudden you're at like the apex of their emotional story? How do you manage that?
You guys they looked like crazy people. I had mine on a little like a little key ring. I had a bunch of cards that I would flip around like just with like the plot points, and these two had a wall in each of their apartment with like
Both of
all
our
the
places
plot
looked like
points.
Homeland.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it
it's
looked like
very-
an episode of
All the
Homeland.
episodes. It's great.
Which I think was the only way that we could possibly keep track of what was going on.
And Jeff, you made your wall quickly because of the last week of prep. Jeff arrived in Winnipeg, and we sat down and said, "Are you looking forward to X scene on Tuesday or whatever?" He said, "What are you talking about?" It's in the
Oh, yeah,
last-"
they
I
didn't
said,
know
"Oh,
that we were shooting all
shoot-
6.
You don't know we're block shooting the entire 6 episodes.
I got to Winnipeg. I had no idea. And my very first thing was I had a monologue with the great John Carroll Lynch, like just me and him from the 6th episode. And I had my very first job out of college was across from John in a show called Body of Proof. That was just John and I, and he's like threatening me, and I was this asshole kid, and he was like, "Yeah, you want to take a walk down to the cell?" And like that was like my first acting job. And then 8 years later, I was doing this monologue with him on my first day from the 6th episode, and I had no idea that we were doing that. and it was very intimidating. But it was amazing. It was amazing because of Nick and Steven. It could have been very complicated and to keep track of everything, but the two of them are so smart, and we're always so, it was the attention to detail of it could have been a disaster to shoot this the way we shot it. But
what was Steven able to do that put you guys in a good place?
So relaxed, first
Talk.
of all.
He's just great at, I mean, obviously he's a professional and knows what he's doing. Sorry to all of the other directors I've worked with, but maybe the best director I've ever worked with. But he knows what he's doing, but he talks to you not as a director to an actor, just as a person, and makes you feel very relaxed and comfortable. And he encourages you and makes you feel like you know what you're doing, even when you know that you don't.
It's always a collaboration with him. It's
Yeah.
always he never tells you what to do. It's always he's such a good listener. That is just to us, but to every single person in every single department. He let everybody kind of bring their artistry to their job, and it just the production design on this show is just mind blowing to me, especially as it starts to get into the series more. And
Especially considering the budget is microscopic.
Crazy. I mean, it's so cool.
I felt like with Steven, he was able to say so little and have such a big impact. I'm sure there are other actors here today, but after the first take, you're kind of okay, that was fine, but there's something, and I don't know what it is that I have to do that's different, or I have to think about something different, and somehow Steven would just know exactly the right, just half a sentence, just go to sleep, that. He would tell, just fall asleep. You'll know when it's action, and I'd be okay, and just fall asleep. But that was exactly, I don't know, what I needed, and he's just good at only saying what's necessary and not kind of overdoing it like I am right now.
For a little context, Steven on the show, one director does the entire season, and then it's different every season. And we try to hire really unconventional directors for TV. So Steven had done one indie film that cost $100,000. Uncle John. It's a really beautiful film. Not the kind of TV director that you would traditionally expect the network to be yeah, sure, cool, hire him. But he's a great human being and a great director, and that paid off.
Can you talk a little bit more about working with John Carroll Lynch? He's kind of the patriarch, it feels like, of this season.
Where did you go? I don't know.
He feels this is very confusing for everyone right now. He feels like my dad, but also scares the shit out of me, which is perfect. He is also a great listener. He's so smart. And I don't know, he has that fatherly quality to him, but still maintain that creepy guy that he kind of plays in this a little bit. And
he's also such a pro, which I love. He just knows everything about theater and film and acting and
everything about everything.
He does. He's he knows everything about sports, politics, cinema. It's crazy. He's a wildly intelligent dude, and he's also super encouraging actor, incredibly giving scene partner, and also something that surprised me is he's super loose. He's very he's got some gruesome stuff at certain points, and we'd be doing crazy stuff, and then he'd kind of be we had a game where he would come up with an insane movie title and go, "Movie or not a movie, The Incredible Ant-Man from the Third Planet of Mars," and had blood all over him. It was a really insane thing to do, but he just made everything so fun, and he's a pro and a real intelligent dude. So it was amazing to have him around to set the tone.
And it's funny, we hired him when not all the scripts were written yet. So to send an actor this pilot script and say, this is a showcase role for the season. You appear in this much of a page at the end. And then it's a leap of faith for him. So we had a conversation with him and told him like where the character goes and why it's so significant and what he would get to do, and he was like, cool.
But also I feel like the vibe of this whole show would feel so different if we ended up with someone other than him. And when I read the pilot, I had this idea of what he would look like and who he would be, but I wasn't thinking of a particular actor. And then the second you mentioned his name, I was like, that's who I imagine. Like, that's exactly who it needs to be. And he's just so incredible, and we're so fortunate to have had him, and we love you.
So, were you guys familiar with the term creepypasta before you started?
I was not.
I was not.
I was not. I've learned a lot about them since. They are fascinating things.
Once I got it, I went on Creepypasta and found a bunch of stories, because I have a very bizarre monster thing. Is it still called the succubus? What's it called? Succubus? I call it the embryo now. Okay.
There's Aisha's character encounters something strange in the No End House.
So I had to go through Creepypasta and like find. I was just trying to find any story that felt like a similar kind of vibe as this presence thing, embryo succubus, because we hadn't really decided exactly what it was, and so I had to put it in terms that I would understand and something that would actually mean something to me, because it needs to be like emotionally stimulating. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole to find some cool creepypastas, and I never was really much of a horror fan, but now I am.
I'm afraid of horror films.
I watch them now.
See, no, I like them, but I like have to know that like my boyfriend's staying over, or like a friend can stay. Like, I can't do it by myself.
Amy is one of the biggest fraidy cats I have ever. And just ignore the fact that I said fraidy cat, because I'm embarrassed about that. But she really is. She jumps at anything.
I think that's a good quality for the character.
It works. I don't know. It's great.
So what is it that you think is the draw of creepypastas? Why are people so fascinated by them?
It's a weird thing. I mean, they're just this like growing corpus of weird fiction online, and it's like people write down stuff that gives them nightmares, and it goes viral, and anybody can write one. You can post it on Reddit, or you can post it anywhere, and it's a self-selecting thing, because the ones that strike a nerve go viral. You know, Slender Man, our first season, Candle Cove, No End House, and they speak to the fears of a generation. I think there are themes that exist throughout these stories, and that will exist throughout the seasons of Channel Zero.
I think it's so cool that they're authored by no one, kind of. They kind of take on their own thing, because it makes it feel more... it just makes it feel more real and surreal and like a bit scarier, I think. And we've always talked about scary stories to tell in the dark. If anyone ever remembers that book, that was like, that book still haunts my dreams. Like
The illustrations.
The illustrations is completely what I think of. Is there was like these pencil horrifying drawings it was a children's book, which is insane. But it was, and it's like, that's kind of like, and it's crazy because these creepypasta, it feels like it's, a lot of a younger audience mostly that is, into it, and it's like, kids are crazy.
It's also such a cool creative outlet, because it's, you can self-publish your own things, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, no one else, whatever, I think it's really a cool experimental website for writers.
And for us in the writer's room, it's particularly cool because the best of these stories, the ones that we like to adapt, have like a really cool premise and concept, and then it's like a launch pad. It's something to build on. So we get to invent, but we start with like a really fertile ground.
Yeah, I would read them before bed and have nightmares about them.
Great
That's
idea.
my homework.
Great
Remember
idea.
I had this dream with the dancing on the rooftop? I told you about that dream. But this like I'm not gonna get
To be
into it
continued
right
later.
now. Sorry. No, it's not worth it.
All right. We have a couple of questions from the audience. From Alicia Smith, who wants to know from Aisha, how does this role compare to other roles we have played? Kadena Forever.
This one, this is probably the most like physically like draining thing I've ever done, because we were on location most of the time. We really weren't in the studio very much at all. And I think, I mean, it's in the previews. So like I was covered in blood from head to toe for a certain portion of the series, which was Nick's idea. Thanks, Nick. So I was, I was having lunch like covered head to toe in blood, and it
But
really
also
like,
remember,
did something.
it's 0 degrees,
Yeah.
so that gets very cold.
Yes.
He's a trooper.
And, like running, like a lot of running, which I always am asked to run and stuff. But this one I just felt was like way more of a physical kind of thing.
There's a physical fight with one person who's on the stage.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Won't spoil it.
I had to do like
One more time.
like action-y things, kicks and stuff. Not really, but like a little bit, and that's not my thing at all. So that was very new for me. I'm used to being like the girl that dresses cool and just comes in, says something funny, and leaves. So this was I think just like physically, this was the first time that I'd ever been challenged in that way, and I was actually I'm really grateful for it, because
You were great at it.
Thanks, Nick.
Did you get like some fight training beforehand, or did they just kind of throw you in and say, go for it?
No, we definitely
Just go for it.
No, we had people helping us and helping, teaching me how to. Can I?
No.
Oh God, no, but like teaching. I can't say it, but I'm not. I don't know how to stab. Like I'm not I'm not a fighter. So someone had to teach me like how it works when you actually like, are using like a knife thing. And I'm not doing it
doesn't
any
look like
justice.
this,
It
just so
doesn't
you
look like this. And I've lost it all. I'm gonna leave. I'll see myself out. But yes, does that answer the question? I think so. Sure. Yeah.
If nothing, it gave us a laugh.
Zorro.
And this one is from Stephen, who wants to know what was the ratio of practical effects to special effects, I guess like visual.
It's a great question.
So many practical.
So many practical.
Oh, is this for me?
I feel like it
yes.
should be. Yeah.
We do mostly practical effects on the show. There aren't any creatures that are created in a hard drive. The VFX that we do are mostly touch-ups. And because we have a house that like moves around, you'll see in future episodes the house shows up in different places. Parts of the house are created by CGI, and parts of it are built for the actors to interact with.
But most of it is built. Like the top part of the house is CGI, but a lot of it is practical.
Yeah, you can get up, you can go in.
You can
I love
maybe
that it
get
was
out.
mostly practical. I don't think I would have been able to do it if it was all CGI. Like especially what did you say it was? The embryo. If that had been completely CGI, I don't know what I would have done, because it was so much of like interacting with the actual object and the things.
Yeah, there are things coming up that we haven't seen yet that were built by a sculptor named Sarah Sitkin, who's based out of LA. She was kind of an art consultant on the show. She did the sculptures inside the No End House that you saw, and there are a couple other things.
Though when I watched the premiere, I was laughing because that scene in the first episode when I walk into, I think it's room 4, that looks like an attic with the screen. That was a big blank white screen. So our director Steven was just off on the side being like, Orchid, Dad, Jules, and like I was like, oh no. So that's like one of the only things that is that's like not practical, but yeah.
run around the stage sometimes. We just like do laps of the stage together.
Yeah, or like I would walk off into a corner, God bless you, I would walk off into a corner and like listen to music and like get in my own weird headspace, and they'd call action and I would be not paying attention, and then she'd come and grab me, and
She'd like throw her phone down and we'd like run onto the
yeah,
set.
but
and
there
they'd
was
be
a
like,
lot of
"Action."
that. There was a lot of that just because we were jumping around so much and going episode to episode, and you know, some things are just, you know, very conversational, and other things are like big emotional scenes or fight scenes, or you know, you're like crying and sobbing. You know, there's a lot of stuff that you have to get into, and couldn't have done it without these.
And
people.
because it was on stage, most of the stuff inside the house in this episode was shot on the last day or two of production, where everybody's like just like punch drunk and loopy.
I was
Right after
falling
the
asleep.
election.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, Jeff was shooting it. Well, I don't know if I should say this. There, yeah,
Oh wait, yeah, you can't talk
It's
about
really hard
that.
to do this without it all.
It is.
yeah. We were shooting a very intense scene during the election. And
We were watching the results come in as we were doing this like crazy scene.
But
There were
also,
3 units.
we were doing a crazy scene upstairs. Aisha was doing a scene downstairs. We had 2 units going, but we had to stop and be quiet while they were shooting. They would roll, and then they would cut, and we would roll as the election was all coming. It was crazy.
yeah, yeah. And then you
Surreal
came
night.
to the monitor, and we're sitting there, and me and the DP are like freaking out and like trying not to pay attention to the election results.
And I was like, I think, can we be done? We've been doing this for 10 hours.
Just come back tomorrow. That was a
Yeah,
tough day.
because we'd been doing the
Didn't-
one, like, because it was a very complicated scene. And I was like, I think I need to go home. Like,
And on the first season, we were shooting during the night of Brexit, and I was like looking at things, and I was like, man, they're crazy. Like, what's going on? Sad.
Oopsies.
So can you guys preview what we've got coming up for the rest of this season? I know we only aired one here, but another one aired last night.
Tonight. Second
Oh,
night.
at 10.
okay. So then can you preview what we can be in for?
Go. I don't remember. We
do it.
shot all 6 at the same time. I don't know what happened.
more
Well,
John Carroll Lynch.
A lot more John Carroll Lynch. The No End House, as we've sort of established in this first episode, the further you go into the house, the further it goes into you. So over the next couple episodes, the rest of the season, you're going to see the No End House pulling stuff out of people's heads and using it against them. And everybody on the stage encounters something different that is particularly traumatic or exploits their vulnerabilities. The second episode, the one that's airing tonight, comes right after this, is what I think of as like the seduction episode. It's the episode where they're in what we call house world, and it starts to find out how to seduce them to stay.
it's a cool one. Perfect. Yeah. That's a lot. It's cool.
Like you're a writer or something.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you
And
so much.
Thank you guys.
For you.